today we will be having a very necessary conversation about vegetation management. And joining us on Necessary Conversations with APUA is Customer Service Engineer within the APUA Electricity Business Unit, Girvan Pigott. Welcome to Necessary Conversations with APUA, Girvan.
Thank you, Sharifa.
Good. So as is customary, we like to ask our guests to share with us a story, something meaningful, something memorable on the job. So what's your story, Girvan?
One of the stories, one thing I would like to highlight, I guess I should say, is pretty much the pride that our guys take in the work that they do. And so what I would say is that one of those feel-good moments, right, that we've actually experienced is pretty much going out to and satisfying customers in terms of their request. What you find happens a lot of customers tend to call into the call center department. And they make a lot of complaints for various things. And trimming of trees is one of those things. And what we tend to do, we try and assign that work or schedule that work from week to week. And one of those feel-good moments was I had a customer call me in the McKinnon's Paradise View area. And they had a tree that was actually affecting one of their lines. Now, when we typically go and do this type of work, we do it particularly if it's interfering with the electrical lines. But in this case, it was actually affecting the customer's telephone lines. And this just goes to show because we try to meet the customer halfway. We try
telephone lines also internet?
Huh? Yeah, telephone lines also internet. And it was affecting that. And the customer, I guess, to do their work, their daily work, they need that. And so the customer called and they asked, could you assist us in this respect? And I said, I'll try my best. So I got one of my teams to go out there and they actually cleared the line for them and it improved their internet service. And that customer called me when they were finished and said, thank you so much, and the guys did an excellent job. They were professional in what they did. And I conveyed that to my guys. And I mean, my guys, they tend to be quite stoic, quite macho type of guys, and you could see that they were pleased. They were quite happy, even if it was just a smile for 2 seconds. You could see they were like, all right, appreciate that, and that means a lot. And that means a lot to me when a customer can actually show their appreciation to the guys that are out there because the work is not easy. And I would say that's one of my feel-good moments because these are things that we experience from time to time. We get the negative, but we get some of the positive. We appreciate the positive.
That's good. If I was a customer, I'd be very happy too. Because the day without internet is not fun.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So, Girvan, how do overgrown trees affect the electrical network?
Yeah, Sharifa, so overgrown trees can affect the network in a myriad of ways, right? To try to put it in context for our system, our overhead lines are pretty much bare aluminum wire spanning throughout the entire island. And so by growing into those lines, right, you can create these short circuit conditions. You can create situations whereby all the energy flows straight to ground. It's the point of least resistance, okay? And those situations can create detrimental situations for the utility and for customers alike. And so those are things that you want to avoid. That's why we need to pretty much maintain our vegetation on island. It's very important. And, that's pretty much what I would say in respect to that.
You mentioned that our overhead power lines are bare, pure aluminum, that's what you said. Is that normal for an overhead network?
Yeah, absolutely it is. You see, it depends on your territory as well. Antigua is a very flat island, right? Majority of the island is relatively flat. Overhead lines make sense. It makes sense from different perspectives. It makes sense from the perspective that we have the land, we should be able to maintain the vegetation on the island because the terrain is not that difficult. And also there's a cost component, economics, right? And so the overhead lines are much more cost effective for us as well. The other good thing with overhead lines is you can actually find the faults a lot easier because you can see them as opposed to on the ground, even though there are ways in which you can find faults on the ground as well. But those are pretty much the what it is, and we've been doing it from inception. So, I mean, it's something that we know how to do. So that's pretty much it. It is very normal. As a matter of fact, in developed countries, in the countryside areas, that's what they do. They use overhead lines and bare aluminum as well.
Okay. When we have unplanned outages, what percentage of those outages are as a result of vegetation issues?
Actually, stemming from probably January to now, that percentage looks like around 10%.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's around 10% have spanned of our outages are probably from vegetation management. Majority of them you'll find during the wet season as well, okay, which is logical, okay? So it's the interesting thing about once it rains, the trees grow quickly, you know, that wild tamarind, it's relentless. And so, I mean, those you tend to find are what impacts in terms of vegetation, impacts our network the most.
Yeah, after the rain and the shrubbery just grows, I can tell you that I once had an amazing view of St. John's from my house, and as soon as the rain came, that was it. No more St. John's, at least a portion of it was gone. But sometimes people may ask, why is it that APUA only talks about vegetation management around hurricane season? I mean, is that the case? Does vegetation management only happen around the hurricane season?
No, it just turns out like what I mentioned earlier. It's the hurricane season tends to fall within the wet season. And, we seem to get a spurt of water during that time. And that is what the vegetation thrives off of. And, you're talking about 108 square miles, and it's a limited amount of resources available to tackle all of these areas. And so, I mean, it becomes a challenge. It becomes a challenge in terms of to try to cover the entire area. So while we're working in one area, the rain is not stopping. The vegetation is still growing. So we still have to deal with those areas. And so we tend to be going back and forth between all the various areas to try to maintain the levels.
I remember going out into the field once when they were doing vegetation management. Actually, a couple of times I've seen it. There's a guy in a bucket truck, and he may have a chainsaw or something, and these trees, he's trimming them, they're coming down. It looks dangerous. So what are some of the other dangers associated with the job, except for the obvious, of course?
Well, I mean, I think you just said it, right? The dangers are pretty much making sure that how you trim the trees, that it does not affect life as well as property. Right? Because these are very heavy branches. When they're cutting, some very large branches are falling. They have to first make sure that the area is clear, that they're going to protect life, they're going to protect the staff that's working around the area. They also have to make sure that they're going to protect themselves. So they have to be strapped into the bucket so that they're not going to fall, because they're sometimes using chainsaws to cut these. And you don't want them for some reason to get tied up into one of these branches and get pulled off of the bucket. So they have to make sure that they're properly secured in the bucket. And so, I mean, the other thing would be electrocution, but that we make sure we avoid that early by pretty much de-energizing the line before we work there.
Which are the scheduled outages that persons may see on Facebook, on radio.
Exactly. So we want to make sure that is taken care of first. So you don't really tend to find too many incidents as a result of the vegetation. There may have been one or two, but you tend not to find that. What you probably find more is more in terms of property. Sometimes it could be vehicle damage. Sometimes we try to work around people's property, but accidents do happen. But this might not sound right, but I would prefer that it is property than life. And so, they do happen. But broken branches and so forth sometimes tend to fall, and they do fall and break glasses or dent someone's property. And so we try to avoid that as much as possible. We try to make sure we reach out to consumers if they have a vehicle or anything that's within close by to where we're going to work, and ask them if they can just relocate it for the time being until we're finished. Because it's for everyone's benefit.
So is APUA does the responsibility of vegetation management fall solely on APUA?
No, I wouldn't say so. I would say APA plays a major part, because most of our infrastructure its tentacles spans throughout the entire country. But I would say everyone has a responsibility. Okay? I know government subcontracts or contracts out work for vegetation management.
And they work with us when that happens?
They do. I would say, for instance, like National Solid Waste and so forth, who work with us and help us. I can say they definitely do help us. They help us in terms of picking up the debris after they're cut. But I know they've actually had some projects whereby they've contracted out individuals to actually prune trees and prune the vegetation along the side of the road. And so those are some of the things. But I would also say even the consumer, the general consumer, should also play a role in respect to that as well.
Before you swipe my next question, that's actually what I was going to ask you. So what role can customers play in managing their own vegetation on their property and their surroundings? What can they do?
I think customers should pay keen attention to what they're planting, what they're growing on their property. I mean, if you're going to leave a wild tamarind tree at the front where our lines are.
Or worse yet, a fruit tree. You know, we love our fruit trees now.
Oh, yeah, a pear tree or even a palm tree.
Palm tree, yes.
Right? I mean, all of these trees are going to grow very tall at some point in time, and they're going to negatively affect the network. And I would say that if that is the case, if you're not prepared to transpose or move that tree from one point to the other, then maybe you shouldn't plant it there, right? Plant small hedges or smaller flower trees or trees that you know are going to be dwarf in size, that will definitely not go up into the lines. And the taller ones, if you like them, just relocate them or plant them adjacent, somewhere else that will not impact the lines, because it's going to result in you having outages, doing without electricity, which, I mean, it's a necessity for people. It's a necessity for all of us. So, I mean, why put yourself in that position, right? And it also puts the utility in a position, because it leaves us with an outage for a period of time before we can get the resources out there to correct the problem. So I think everyone is responsible for maintaining the vegetation within their surroundings.
So, Girvan, in a situation where you have a property, let's say you manage your vegetation properly, you're a responsible homeowner, but your neighbor has a tree that is interfering with your service for electricity, telephone, whatever the case is. So what would you advise that customer to do?
I would advise that customer to call the call center, call 311, right? Make a request. I won't say a complaint, but make a request, right? And ask if you can get APA services or assistance in respect to trimming that tree. If you need the tree completely removed, I would suggest that you get someone to cut that tree, but APA will come and de-energize the line for you for the time that is going to be done. All right? And I think that would be the best way to go about doing it. So if you can have someone that can cut the trees, we will de-energize the lines for you. When you're finished with clearing the trees, then we will re-energize it. But we will also come and assess it first, because it might be a situation whereby we might feel more comfortable if we actually did it. All right? Because if the lines are severely interfering, or if the trees are severely interfering with the lines, then you cutting the trees might create more damage to the lines. And so it might be best for us to do it. So I think the best thing for you to do is to call 311, call the call center, tell them what the situation is. We'll have someone come out and assess the problem for you, and we'll advise you in terms of the way forward from that point on.
Very valuable information, Girvan, and I want to thank you so much for joining us for Necessary Conversations with APUA, where we had a discussion about vegetation management. So here's some takeaways from our discussion with Mr. Pigott. So trees interfering with power lines can account to up to 10% of unplanned electrical outages. Also, before you carry out your own vegetation management, please feel free to consult the APUA Electricity Business Unit by giving us a call at the Information Center at 311. So again, thank you so much for joining us for Necessary Conversations with APUA, and join us on Facebook and YouTube for our next episode, where we will be having a necessary conversation about some common terms that you may hear from our guys as it relates to delivery of service. So until then, stay safe and bye-bye.